to David or to John or Jack and even Bob. But right now you are listening to me, so pay attention. Heads up, Henry. My message is simple. I want you to make sure that more people listen to WPLP. And you can do that. It's like falling off a log. Just say to someone you know, hey, have you heard of WPLP? And bingo, that's it. Just say it's 57 on the AM dial. Tell them Uncle Tim sent you.
Shh. Good evening, and welcome to the Bob Lassiter Show, Tampa Bay's top-rated talk show. Rumor has it that our very own Top Banana is a tad feisty tonight, but what the heck? That's what makes him well, whatever. And now, here's Mr. Lassiter.
Minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, a very good Monday to you. Monday, May the 11th, 1987. Just a couple of days away from the big event that we wait for each and every month right here at the radio station. Of course, you all know what I'm talking about, so there's no need to go into that any further. Lassiter with you until 11, as I am every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You're right here at News Talk 57. WPLP, don't you know? We are going to get back to basics tonight. Yes, we're going to do one of our ever-popular Back to Basics programs. When I sat down today and I said, well, back to basics, what does that mean? Well, you've got your religion, right? You've got your politics, and you've got your sex. And then, of course, there are the three biggies, the big three: abortion, gun control, and the death penalty. So what I have done is I've put together 12 simple little questions. And no, it's not a poll, nor is it a quiz. But we've broken them down into three categories. For example, politics or current events, as the case may be. Why? Why, pray tell, are we holding the Iran-Contra hearings? Your opinion. Why are we holding these Iran-Contra hearings? Question number 2. Assuming that all the charges against Gary Hart are true, what difference does it make? Question number 3. What more could the government do to stem the AIDS epidemic? What more could the government do to stem the AIDS epidemic? Now we move on to sex, one of our favorite topics here at the radio station, of course. First question in the sex category. What can we do to reverse the trend toward teenage promiscuity? Question number 2. Explain unnatural or abnormal sexual behavior to me. You see, I don't understand what is unnatural or abnormal. I thought perhaps you could explain that to me. And last but not least, question number 3, define obscenity. In the category of religion, one of my favorites, question number 1, how long did it take God to create the world? Question number 2, what would have happened had Jesus not been crucified? Question number 3, give me an example of a moralistic absolute right and wrong. And finally, the big 3. Number 1, at what point does life begin? That's the one on abortion. At what point does life begin? Question number 2, the one on gun control. What would happen? What would happen if all the handguns were outlawed? And question number 3 on the death penalty. What would happen if the death penalty was abolished? You see, very, very simple. And you can attack one of them, you can attack 9 of them, you can attack 7 of them, you can take all 12. It's up to you. I'm easy to get along with. I know that people say, oh, Lassiter, he's so hard to get along with. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm easy to get along with. Let me give you the telephone numbers. In Hillsborough, 224-0057, 224-0057. Pinellas, 393-0057, 393 operator 57. It's another Back to Basics night. Mix or match. You take whichever ones you want. Of course, I'll go through them with you again. I certainly wouldn't expect you to remember them just from one reading. Question number 1. Why? Why, pray tell, in your humble opinion, are we holding the Iran-Contra hearings? Question number 2. Assuming that all the charges against Gary Hart are indeed true, What difference does it make? Question number 3. What more could the government do to stem the AIDS epidemic? In the second set, which we call sex, question number 1, what can we do to reverse the trend toward teenage promiscuity? Question number 2, explain unnatural or abnormal sexual behavior to me. Question number 3, define obscenity. In the religion category, question number 1, how long did it take God to create the world? Question number 2, what would have happened had Jesus not been crucified? I love questions like that. Question number 3, give me an example of a moralistic absolute. Last but not least, the big 3. At what point does life begin? What would happen if handguns were outlawed? And what would happen if the death penalty was suddenly abolished? Oh my goodness, what a terrible thought, isn't it? 12 and a half minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. You have the phone numbers. You do, right? Of course you do. They have a used aluminum scrap pile. Well, the Saturday happens to be one of those now and then. Saturday, May 16th, the J&M Aluminum. You can come dig through the scrap pile for old window hinges, old window cranks, aluminum siding pieces, roof pans, new and used, by the way, gutters, downspouts, styrofoam roof systems, materials for roofs over mobile homes. I mean, the list is just endless. They have everything there sitting on the floor, and it's just getting to be a little bit too much. By the way, they're also selling things like used screen doors for just $5. You simply can't go wrong. It's almost worth knocking a hole in the wall for, you know what I mean? Used windows for only $15, just to get rid of them. John and Michael DeCosmo of J&M Aluminum want you to come by Saturday. That's Saturday, May 16th, from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. Where, you ask? Well, I'm glad you did. I almost forgot to tell you. J&M Aluminum, obviously. 44 Haitian.
All right, but that's not what I called to talk about.
Minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock, another Back to Basics program. I mean, we've got everything you could possibly want. Politics, sex, religion, and the big 3. There is certainly no excuse whatsoever. No excuse at all for not taking part. One line open in Pinellas, 393-0057, 393-0057. It filled up as we spoke. 2 lines open in Hillsborough, 224-0057, 224-0057. Hi, Reddington Beach. You're on the air at WPLP.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
I'd like to answer one of your questions.
Okay, tackle it.
Well, you asked one if the handguns were outlawed.
Uh-huh.
I believe if handguns were outlawed, probably a large percentage of the majority of law-abiding citizens would surrender their guns if they had them. But I really can't think of any criminal who would surrender his gun.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that would just take away the guns of the law-abiding citizens and really not affect the criminal element.
Oh, but sure it would. As the criminals got caught, it would also remove their guns.
Oh, sure, but the criminals would also have access to guns, too. I mean, the law-abiding citizen would not be able to get something off the black market or from, another state, another country. There's an underground that's available to the criminal element that's not available to the law-abiding citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So
what would happen?
Would just leave the guns in the criminal's hands only.
So what would happen?
I would hate to find out.
Well, it's real easy to find out. You could go to England, you could go to Japan, you could go to France, you could go almost any place and find out what happens when only the criminal element has handguns and the private citizens don't.
Well, there would be a transition, though, that you would have to go through. I'm sure you could probably make that occur here, too. But there would be a transition that would be painful to go through.
Well, I don't say how it would be painful. The overwhelming majority of people who die from a handgun wound in this country die because they were shot by a relative or someone they know in a domestic dispute, not in the commission of a felony.
But how many guns are used in crimes?
A fair number. However, I might also point out that in the last year that I saw the statistics, which I believe is for 1984, Of the 12,000 deaths from handguns in this nation, only 200 of those were criminals being shot, which included the police.
Well,
all of the others, the other 11,800, were either suicides or murders by friends and relatives.
okay, but do you really seriously believe that if that gun was not available to that person who, in a domestic quarrel like that, picked it up and used it, if that gun wasn't there, don't you think he would have picked up a knife because of his frame of mind? I mean, what he's got.
Well, certainly some of them would. Certainly some of them would have. However, what about, for example, a small wife shooting her husband? So certainly, yes, some of them would have picked up a bar stool and hit somebody over the head, but there would have been far, far fewer murders because it's much more difficult to kill somebody with a knife than it is with a handgun. With a handgun, you can kill somebody at 200, 300, 400, 500 feet, but you can't do that with a knife.
Okay, maybe it wouldn't happen that particular...
I mean, you're just making excuses. I mean, can't you see the futility of this? You're making excuses.
Are you saying that if they're in a situation like that, if somebody really wants to kill and they have a relationship where they go through such extremes that they get so violent that they really actually want to kill each other, if it doesn't happen that particular day because the gun isn't available, it's going to happen sooner or later.
Oh, but a gun is such a nice, easy way to do it. All the other ways aren't nice and easy. So when you beat somebody to death, when you beat somebody to death with a baseball bat, that takes a lot of time, and it's very, very messy. And it also takes a great deal of exertion. When you stab someone, it's also very messy, and it takes a great deal of exertion. Most people could fend off a knife attack, but I don't know anybody that can fend off a bullet attack. Do you?
No. But I believe that if it's going to happen...
come on.
You don't need...
Let's not kid each other. You don't believe. I mean, it's something that you just want to
kill
think.
Somebody, they can find a way to do it. If there's not a gun available, they will find something else to do it with.
Well, for openers, most people with a gun in their hands, it's a split-second decision. If you've got to go out and, get a car and wait for the person to be walking down the street so that you can run them over, chances are pretty good you're going to cool off a little bit. But when you have that gun there, not much time to think about it, is there?
That's true.
And isn't it awfully, awfully strange that in all of the other industrialized nations in the West, they don't have anywhere near the crime rate we do, and they don't have handguns. Well, if you want to protect your family, you can still do it with a shotgun or with a rifle.
Do you think the crime rate would really go down if you take away the weapons?
Significantly. Significantly. Especially murder. Because most murders aren't committed by felons. Most murders are committed by husbands, wives, children, uncles, grandparents.
Other than murders, I mean regular crimes, other crimes that are committed outside of that. Do you think that those type of crimes would diminish if you take away...
Well, the vast majority of those other kinds of crimes aren't committed with the use of a weapon. I mean, all this crime that we're talking about, when they break in and steal your radio out of your car, or when they watch your house and when you're gone they come in and unload it, those people aren't carrying weapons. Would have no effect there at all. Except that when they do that, far fewer of them would walk out with handguns.
Well, you haven't converted me, but you made me think.
Good. That's the whole purpose of it.
All right.
Thank you. Pinellas, 393-0057, Hillsborough, 224-0057. 12 questions. They're all over the place. St. Pete, hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm calling from the phone booth. If you hear extra noise, I know what would happen if Jesus had not been crucified.
Okay, what's that?
Well, he'd have got 5 years, and they'd have let him out in 1. And all the little old ladies would have called up the equivalent of talk show hosts and complained about letting criminals out on the street, and then they would have crucified him.
Well, you see, I think you missed the point.
No, I got the point.
Oh, what is the point then?
Well, the point is that we would not have been, quote, saved, unquote, and the world would not have been redeemed, quote, unquote.
That's half the point. Yes, that's half the point. And the other half of the point is, kind of shoots down the free will theory because Jesus had to be crucified.
Yeah,
he had to be crucified. He had no choice.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I was being facetious. Pontius Pilate would have been voted out of office for being soft on crime, and all these other things would have happened. But, yeah, you're right. It shoots down the free will completely. And it also shoots down the salvation theory because he had to die to save everybody, which is somewhat something masochistic theory, I suppose.
Well, of course, it's not the only example of people who had their free will usurped by God so that his plan could be forthcoming. It's not the only example at all. There are numerous examples, and of course everybody likes to run around saying, oh, well, God gave us free will. I guess God only gave some of us free will.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, your point is well taken, except that, I'm a person who believes in Jesus, but I don't believe that Jesus was God, if that makes any sense. In other words, I believe his philosophy had a lot to say, and I believe in his philosophy, but I don't necessarily believe that, he was the son of this guy with a beard up in the sky, and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he had to be crucified historically, as Socrates. There was a certain inevitability to it, but facetiously speaking, they would have crucified him later. And he was a rebel. He was a philosopher. It's like, why did Martin Luther King have to die? Those people have always had to die in history.
I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be good. Pinellas 393-0057. Hillsborough, remarkably quiet. 224-0057. Largo, hi, you're on the air. WPLP.
Hello, Bob. I'd like to answer the first three questions.
First three, okay. Why are we holding the Iran-Contra hearings?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but I think a good main reason, it's a good way of bashing President Reagan, and it's a good way of the liberals of cutting down the aid to freedom fighters all over the world.
Well, you are, of course, aware of the fact that all members of Congress wanted these hearings held, including the president's most ardent supporters.
That's right.
So that kind of takes away that liberal bashing thing there, doesn't it?
Well, the liberals certainly like to get in on this, and like they say, it's very few things they could get on President Reagan, but this is one of them. So I like to see what happens, and if he's wrong, he's wrong, and if he's exonerated, let's go on with it.
Well, then I suppose you'd have the liberals to thank for that either way, huh?
That's right. I guess we would on that one.
Question number 2. Assuming that all the charges against Gary Hart are true, what difference does it make?
Well, I think it makes a lot in the fact that he shows terribly poor judgment. Hey, follow me around. I'm not messing around, and he catches him. It really shows how not very smart at all, I would think,
mm-hmm.
to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Of course, other people have done. Of course, other people have done pretty much the same thing. I would have to think that Ronald Reagan's behavior with Nancy shows pretty poor judgment.
Pretty poor judgment. His wife.
Yeah, but she wasn't when he impregnated her.
You got no proof of that, though.
Well, the proof that we have is a baby that was born full-term size in apparently a remarkably short period of time.
Hey, the Reagans are extra healthy people.
Mm-hmm. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?
No, not really.
You ought to be.
Give me the third one. Come on, you want to hear the third one. You'll like this one.
What more could the government do to stem the AIDS epidemic?
Well, it could murder all homosexuals or even people who speak with lisps.
Uh-huh.
That would hurt. That would help a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah? Oh, go ahead, you gutless wonder. Go ahead.
I'm not gutless, but...
Sure you are. Go ahead.
Really,
Go ahead, punk. Go for it. I mean, this is your big moment in the sun. How old are you, boy?
15.
15. Well, here you've led 15 years of absolute anonymity. You've got nothing but another 55, 60 to look forward to. Go ahead. It's your big moment in the sun.
Well, like I said, thank you very much, and I'll be listening to you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Chickened out, didn't he?
Bye-bye.
The last minute he chickened out. One line open. It's in Pinellas, 393-0057. St. Petersburg. Hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Also, may I ask, is it permissible after getting my view on one of the questions to go off on a tangent, or you want to stick right with the question and that be it?
Well, it all depends. Let's see.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let you make the judgment then. Regarding the question of when human life begins, perhaps folks would like to consider the conclusions of the first International Conference on Abortion, which was held in Washington, D.C. in October 1967, on experts in gynecology, geneticists, etc. Their conclusion by a vote of 19-1 was, quote, the majority of our group could find no point in time between the union of sperm and egg, or at least the blastocyst stage, and the birth of the infant, at which point we could say that this was not a human life.
Mm-hmm.
The changes occurring between implantation, a 6-week embryo, a 6-month fetus, a 1-week-old child, or a mature
Who were some of the
participants
at this? Who were some of the participants at this?
I don't know. I'm taking this on faith that this is true. I don't know the details that it to be true, and it can certainly check in and find out for sure that this occurred. You can take that for what it's worth in determining for people who wish to pursue it further.
Well, of course, that raises a couple of rather interesting questions.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Say again?
That raises a couple of rather interesting questions. You see, I have a plant sitting home on my dining room table.
Mm-hmm.
And about, 2 months ago, a new shoot came out of it. Now, if I separate the plant, then I have 2 plants, but right now I have 1 plant with 2 shoots.
Uh-huh.
Of course, you could also put some microscopic organisms in a dish and watch them under a microscope, and at some point, one of the little things there will attempt to split in 2.
Right, okay, sexual, yeah.
But it won't split quite yet. So as long as it's not split, how many little organisms do we have there? 1 or 2? We don't have 2 until it splits, right? I don't have 2 plants until I separate the 2. I have but 1 plant.
Okay, but there is on the fusion, the whole genetic code is present, right? Do you disagree with that?
Well, sure, the whole genetic code is present in my plant, as it is in the little dish there too, with the microscopic organism.
In the human genetic code, you're picking up some of the chromosomes from the father and some from the mother, and the traits.
Well, same thing with my plant. Same thing with the plant.
Well,
but it's only 1 plant until it's separated.
You know, even if you go to the end of the spectrum and say,
if I separate it too soon, if I separate it too soon, then the new offshoot will die because it cannot exist by itself. I have to give it a chance to fully develop before I separate them.
Is your point there, though, on a general notion that one who cannot, or shall we say a being or whatsoever, that cannot live entirely on its own without help from...
is not a separate human being?
Is not, is that your point? Because in that case, is an infant on a respirator in the hospital...
An infant on a respirator is not dependent on another human being.
True.
I mean, you can take a fetus...
the general point of
you can take a fetus...
unto itself in an environment that we,
you can take we'll try it a 4th time.
Pardon?
You can take a fetus from the mother, let's say at 13 weeks or 17 weeks.
Right.
There's not a damn thing you can do to keep it alive. Nothing. Well, absolutely nothing.
Okay, at this point. Now, is it not the case that...
By the way, when is your birthday?
Liability was at a much later date, and in retrospect...
When is your birthday, by the way?
June 24th of 1951.
That's the day you were, born?
Uh-huh.
I see.
Yeah.
See, how come you don't date...
Would you speak more loudly? I can't hear you.
You could if you'd stop talking while I was.
Okay.
How come you don't date yourself from the day of inception?
Convenience, probably, because it's difficult to know the exact day of conception, perhaps. So it has that kind of convenience. Why don't I date myself from 10 days beforehand? Am I all that different 10 days before birth?
Yes. You weren't ready yet. Nature had decided it wasn't time for you to live outside of your mother's womb. Nature had decided that the chances of your survival outside of the womb, even 10 days before, were not as good as they were the day that nature had you born.
But I wasn't, in your view, in any sense, a different entity from my mother at that point?
That's correct.
How about the out-of-womb surgery that occurred, as they've done at least a few times, where the infant was taken out and then put back in? Now, was that a person for a while, although connected, of course, at that point, or somewhat a little more in your view of a person, and then lost a bit of personhood when he was put back into the womb after the surgery?
I don't know.
I hope you think on it. I'm sure you don't want to do away with any persons unnecessarily.
No, nobody wants to do away with any persons unnecessarily at all.
Is the fact that skin grafts from a child to a mother can't be more safely done than in the general population of one a human being to another, that there's a different brainwave pattern, that the blood type is as likely, as in any other 2 instances of other people, to be different.
Of course, my very point, the child is part of the mother.
But all those are different from the mother. Does that...
No, they're not all different from the mother.
As likely to be different from the mother as the incidence of any other 2 beings having the same or different blood types, etc. That weighs not at all with you?
Well, what weighs with me is that at some point, it becomes a human being. At some realistic point. But at another point, it is clearly part of the mother.
Okay. in the fertilization outside that's done, and then the implantation, that in our current state of technology, those neonates cannot continue without being implanted into womb. If a development of an artificial womb occurred, would you say that those particular...
Well, since you're asking me all these questions, let me turn around and ask you a couple, okay? How come it's only men who seem to be interested in this?
I don't believe it is. I think some of the polls, but I take them with a ton of salt, much less a grain, are that women are more likely to be on the quote pro-life side than
well, what the polls show you is that roughly 20% of the population is vehemently pro-life, approximately 20% of the population is vehemently pro-choice, and the remaining 60% say it's nobody's business but the people involved.
I've seen a series of polls, not that I believe that...
And whenever you bring up the topic on the talk radio show, whenever you bring up the topic on the talk radio program, the overwhelming majority of respondents are men.
Well, I don't know, maybe culturally they won't speak it. I you know,
or maybe women think it's nobody's damn business except their own.
Even to speak out on the other side. Maybe, I don't know, culturally conditioned or something, perhaps not.
Maybe they just kind of sit back and laugh like hell at us men because it's just not our business. We ain't the ones that carry them and go through the grief.
As they've done with some...
or raise them.
On monkeys, I don't know if they carry the full term allegedly.
Well, you know, we've gone on with this for, we've gone on with this for 8 minutes, which is way longer than I should have in the first place.
Thank you for being civil with me. I hope I was with you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The phone numbers that put you on the air at WP...
Never give people who disagree with you a chance to talk. Bob.
The time, a back to basics night. In case you weren't around when I gave out the 12 questions, I'll go through them very briefly. 4 categories: current events or politics, sex, religion, and the big 3. First category, current events, politics. Why are we holding the Iran-Contra hearings right now? Question 2, assuming all charges against Gary Hart are true, what difference does it make? Question 3, what more could the government do to stem the AIDS epidemic? Moving on to sex. Question number 1. What can we do to reverse the trend toward teenage promiscuity? Question number 2. Explain unnatural or abnormal sexual behavior. Question number 3. Define obscenity. In the religion category, the first one. How long did it take God to create the world? Question number 2. What would have happened had Jesus not been crucified? I love that one. Question number 3. Give me an example of moralistic absolutes. And finally, last but certainly not least, the big 3. The big 3 in talk radio: abortion, gun control, and the death penalty. On that abortion question, at what point does life begin? Question number 2, what would happen if all handguns were outlawed? Question number 3, what would happen if the death penalty was abolished? A line open in each county. I love these. Just love them. Clearwater, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Good evening, Bob.
Hi.
Do you want me to answer all the questions or just a few?
Mix and match, take your choice.
Pardon?
Mix and match, take your choice.
I don't care. Ask me any of them.
No. No, this is not a poll.
Oh.
If you have nothing to say, then you have no reason being on the phone.
Well, I have something to say about all of them, really.
Well, go right ahead.
Well, let's see. First of all, how long did it take to create the world? I think in the Bible it says that it took 7 days, but then a little later on, or a little earlier, I'm not sure which, it says a day to God may be as a second or 1,000 years. So that leaves it pretty wide open.
No, I don't think it does. It actually leaves it pretty short. You see, because the Bible clearly says created the world, and the world is still being created.
No, that's true too.
So he didn't create the world, did he?
Well,
maybe he's creating the world as we speak, but that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says he created the world, and on the seventh day he rested when he was finished. But he's obviously not finished.
Well, I agree.
If indeed there is a God,
Actually,
the creator.
We're creating it also, so we're not finished either. Visual decision, what is obscene to one person, may be totally normal to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time you run into problems is when two people with opposite ideas decide to share the same area with each other and don't want to give the other person the freedom to, express themselves in their own way. So basically, it's a problem with manners. If a person is polite, normally that means that they refrain from upsetting the other person around them, and when they're by themselves, they express themselves any way they want to. So that's the way I see it. Really, is really just a problem of manners, and I think so many of the questions you ask and the problems that we see in society are either a question of manners or responsibility. You can't force someone to have either one.
Well, why excuse one party from having manners and hold it against the other and force them to have manners? It could equally be argued that the party who was being offended, if they had manners, would simply turn around and walk away as opposed to bitching and moaning.
Well, that's true. I think, first of all, manners have to be encouraged by a good example. I think they can be learned. And, of course, if everyone had good manners, you could say that there wouldn't be any problem. The problem is when one person's definition of good manners conflicts with the other person's, and neither one of them are willing to compromise. And I think when you have the problems like abortion and so forth, it's a problem of responsibility. You have one person has a particular idea of what should be done, and they try to force that idea on somebody else. The other person, in the case of the person who wants to have an abortion, the problem could have been avoided at some point, possibly, by their taking more responsibility for their actions, whether it be taking precautions not to get pregnant or abstaining or whatever. But there are many decision points where the person could have made a different decision. The problem with forcing things to into a certain pattern by laws is that laws limit a person's choices of actions and try to fix you in only one possible choice or several choices. And I think that survival of all of us depends on having freedom to handle the situation that you are in, not some other situation which some law thinks is there. That to the degree that you're able to take responsibility for your actions and look at the possible futures that you're creating, you will be able to make the right decision. And based on what you've learned and your past experience, you'll be able to make the right decision. And to the degree that you're fixed.
Is there some wrap up to this? You've been rambling now for 3 minutes. Is there some wrap up to it?
The wrap up is that to the degree that you're fixed in only one particular idea, unwilling to look or unwilling to communicate with other people and unwilling to let them have opinions, you'll get into trouble.
All right, thank you much.
Okay.
Countryside, your turn at WPLP.
Hello.
Hello.
I was going to talk about your banning of pistols.
Uh-huh.
Well, some of these, if pistols were banned, it would only give organized crime another item to smuggle in and sell, just like illegal drugs. Of course, the government would...
Of course, organized crime, of course, there wouldn't really have any interest in doing that, because that would give people the weapons to fight back against them. So that doesn't make an awful lot of sense, does it?
The whole thing. Organized crime isn't interested in robbing individual people or burglarizing people. This is a drug addict's crime.
Well, sir, what happened? We still had burglaries and things like that long before we had an awful lot of drug addicts. And I think you'll find still that most people who commit crimes today are not drug addicts.
Well, most of your burglary and theft is from drug addicts.
Well, sir, you might like to think that, but it happens not to be true.
Well, who says that?
People that should know, the law enforcement agencies, sir.
Statistics don't tell the truth.
Oh, I see. You tell the truth because you're sitting there at home in your trailer or whatever it is, and you want to believe that, so you tell the truth, and the law enforcement agencies are lying through their teeth
to us. Can I tell you something funny? This actually happened. Neil Rogers and Jerry Williams are friends of yours, right?
Neil Rogers is. I don't know Jerry Williams.
Well, here's what happened when they both worked at a radio station down in South Miami.
I know exactly the story you're going to tell.
Oh, okay. You know about it?
Uh-huh.
Okay, they were robbed, but they were...
No, they weren't robbed, sir. You've got the story backwards. I will be delighted to tell you what the story is. Sir, I will be delighted to tell the people what the story is. One night, while Jerry Williams was working on the air, he looked out through the glass in the control room, and he could see that someone had wandered in off the street and was in the process of holding up the board operator, the producer. And on the air, he said, would somebody please call the cops? There's someone there robbing my producer. That's what happened, sir.
Okay, but the next day, Jerry Williams went back to Boston, and Neil Rogers went down to the friendly gun store and bought himself a gun.
No, sir, it wasn't the next day, quite at all, and Neil has since gotten rid of the gun.
Oh, I don't believe that.
I see, sir. Do you know Neil Rogers?
Yes, I do.
Of course, now you're really gonna lie. What's his real name, sir?
I only met him as Neil. I met him at a restaurant.
You met him at a restaurant once, so you know Neil Rogers. I see.
He's a nice man.
No, he's not. He's one of the most despicable human beings on the face of the earth. He is mean.
Just like you. Mm-hmm. Miserable. Drop dead.
I love it. I just absolutely love it. Fantastic. Mango, you're on the air, WPLP.
Yeah, Bob. I wanted to ask you, several months ago, and maybe 6 months ago, I was listening to Paul Harvey on my automobile radio, and on this gun control thing, he cited these two towns. Apparently they were not large cities, but maybe suburb areas of a larger city. And I forget which ones they were, but I wondered if you had heard anything about this. One of the towns passed an ordinance banning handguns, or...
Yep, right outside of Chicago.
The other town passed an ordinance requiring every household to have a gun.
That's correct. I believe that was in Georgia.
And he said in the town that required every household to have a gun, the crime dramatically dropped. In the town that banned the guns, the crime rate increased.
Well, one town was a rural town out in the middle of nowhere. The other town was a big city suburb.
Suburb of Chicago, wasn't it?
That's correct.
But nonetheless, I'm curious if this is true, why this hasn't been explored.
Well, they were not.
When these discussions come up,
my recollection of the story is they were not dramatic increases by any stretch of the imagination. It is
the dramatic decreases in the town that required every household to have a gun.
Sir, neither the decrease nor the increase was dramatic.
Well,
the increase was in line with the national averages, and that's in the town, of course, outside of Chicago that had banned guns, was quite in line with the national averages as I recall the story. The other town that required guns is a relatively remote by our standards today, rural town that had virtually no crime to start with. So 1 or 2 or 3 instances over the course of a year would have affected their crime rate. Because they were a small town out in the middle of nowhere.
I believe the armed robbery, for example, dropped like 80%.
Sir, there was no armed robbery in this town. It was a small rural town out in the middle of nowhere.
There was 2 armed robberies, because I remember he listed that as one of them. And that dropped like 80%, as I recall. And he listed the murders, the rapes, the armed robberies, burglaries, and it was a dramatic...
You're not listening to me at all, are you? One was a small farming community, sir. A couple of stores and a gas station.
Huh?
One was a small farming community, a couple of stores and a gas station. They didn't have any crime to speak of to start with, sir.
But proportionately, it dropped. Is that not significant?
Sir, there were no murders, there were no rapes, and there were no armed robberies in the town to start with.
Then that's not the story Paul Harvey gave. He listed, in fact, the number of murders, what they were, what they went to, the number of armed robberies. Now, they were not large in number, that is true. But the drop in them...
Well, how many were there, sir?
Dramatic.
How many were there, sir?
I'd say I don't recall.
How many murders do you think there are in any given small town in any given year? 1 or 2?
I don't know. I've never made a point.
So if you normally had 2 in a small town, 1 year you only had 1, that'd be a 50% decrease, wouldn't it, sir?
But this was a decrease in every category of crime.
Sir, we're talking about a rural town that virtually had no crime, but thank you so much anyway.
Few people realize.
Tommy Pinko Faggot. Bob.
The time. It's a back to basics night. 12 simple questions. Pick and choose. You take any ones you want. Madeira Beach, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Now, Bob, run down the 12 simple questions one time. What's the first one?
I'm not doing this as a poll, sir. If you can't remember what they were, then you must not.
It's not a poll. I've listened to it about 3 times, and I can't remember them all. I've written down some of them.
Well, just go with the ones that you have.
Why are we having the Iran-Contra thing?
Uh-huh.
I think just to put a little honesty back in government. I think this is much more serious than the Watergate thing.
Indeed it is. Much more significant.
Ask some of those down. I can't remember them all.
Well, then you must not feel strongly enough about them. I'm not doing this like a poll. I'm not going to sit here going through them over and over and over again.
Well, I know. I listened to you many nights. Let me look on this piece of paper. I've written some of them down. I can't see them all. Gary Hart, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think that was just a matter of judgment. I don't think that it's important whether or not somebody's been to bed with somebody or not. I think that's gone down so many times. I think that he had plenty of warning about that they were going to look at him about that. And if I was running for a major office, I'd have been a lot more careful about what I did. Whether he was doing anything with the lady or not is unimportant. The fact is, it's just bad judgment. Trying to see these here. Abortion? What's the abortion question?
Thank you so much. Bel Air, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yeah, could you repeat all 34 of them, Robert? No sense of humor tonight, okay. Confucius says that all problems can be solved with logic, so I'll try to apply logic to what isn't the government doing regarding AIDS? Is that how you worded the question?
No.
Well, I don't think they're doing anything regarding trying to deter the spread of the disease. There are many simple things that have been used before. For instance, anyone requiring a state license, someone that is performing work on the public, they should be tested for the virus. We're not even doing that.
Well, which categories did you have in mind?
Well, you're talking about you mentioned what isn't the government doing regarding...
Oh, yeah, I know what I said. I'm asking you which categories of those people serving the public that you have in mind.
You can start with, let's just pick a simple one, barbers, for instance. Many states in the country, if my information is correct, require that TB testing still go on in order to qualify for that state licensing.
Mm-hmm.
And doctors, dentists, let's start with doctors. Why shouldn't they be tested for AIDS? They're handling people. They're giving injections.
Well, that's not how AIDS is passed along.
What do you mean that's not how AIDS is?
From handling people, you don't get AIDS from being handled.
Well, if there's a break in the skin and the mixing of body fluids, and you're in a profession that puts you in close public contact, I think that I have the right as a citizen to know that person is free of AIDS, even if there's a slight chance that I might...
Well, I suppose you and I might bump into each other tomorrow at the shopping mall, and you might have a slight cut, and I might have a slight cut, so therefore I guess you should be tested then, too.
Yeah, but we're talking about going and giving business in good faith to a doctor, a dentist, or anyone along these lines, and paying a fee for his services, and...
oh, that's what makes the difference, because you're paying money.
And also that he's licensed by the state. And he should be certified by the state that he is free of this disease, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
in my humble opinion. I just don't feel that...
So he goes and he gets a test today, and he shows negative today. What proof is that he's free of it tomorrow? How often does he have to be tested daily?
We have a problem right now, but still, I say that the government is doing absolutely nothing.
Well, yeah, I know the government's doing absolutely nothing, but I'm trying to get back to your premise here. How often should they be tested?
How often should they be tested? Well, I say start with once. I think that would tell us a lot right there.
No, all it tells us is up to the day of the test. That's all that tells us.
It also tells us if we have carriers out amongst us that are handling people and handling hypodermic needles, and their licenses could be revoked.
It's a start. Sir, you don't pass AIDS by handling the needle. You pass AIDS by using the same needle immediately thereafter while it still has blood on it.
There's one documented case, from what I understand. As a matter of fact, I think I heard it on your radio program, where a nurse was handling a patient who was violent.
No, sir, you heard no such thing on my radio program. I don't allow that kind of crap to go out over the air.
Not on your radio program, on your station, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible, and, I just think that they ought to start somewhere. I don't think it's a solution, but I just don't see that they've started, anything as far as trying to curtail the spread of the disease. I think they're spending their time in research. Rightfully so, but should also spend some time in trying to quell it.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
CBS News coming up at the top of the hour, too.
Tom Richards in the WPLP News Center, Morning News on Tampa Bay's first news and talk station.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you the scourge of the shuffleboard set, the man the Trailer Court Association would like to run out of town, Tampa Bay's top banana of talk, the monstrous Mad Dog Bob Lassiter.
After the hour of 9 o'clock, welcome back. Hour number 2 on this Monday, May the 11th, 1987. Lassiter with you until 11. We're just doing kind of a back to basics tonight. Back to basics, 12 questions. No, it's not a poll. And no, I will not read them to you when you get on the phone. If they don't mean enough to you that as I'm going through them, you can remember the 1 or 2 or 3 that are of interest to you, then I'm not terribly interested in talking to you. My goodness. Somebody that can't remember a question or two for a few minutes, certainly their opinion on it doesn't mean very much, does it? At any event, we have broken it up into 4 categories. We have your ever-popular religion, your sex and your politics. Of course, what would talk radio be without religion, sex, and politics? And then there are the big 3. Not so much anymore, but in days gone by, the big 3 were the 3 topics on talk radio: abortion, gun control, and the death penalty. Let's run through the questions one time here. Under the category of politics and or current events, question number 1, why are we holding the Iran-Contra hearings up there in Washington, D.C.? I mean, my goodness, they're going to all this time, trouble, and effort. The least you could do is to try to figure out why they're doing it. Question number 2, assuming that all the charges against Gary Hart are true, what difference does it make? Question number 3, what more could the government be doing to stem the AIDS epidemic? What more could the government be doing? Now let's move on to sex, okay? I knew you were waiting for that one. Question number 1. What can we do to reverse the trend toward teenage promiscuity? Question number 2. Can you possibly explain to me what is an unnatural or an abnormal sexual act? What is unnatural or abnormal in sexual behavior? If you could explain that to me. You know how dense I am. I lead a very sheltered life. Question number 3. Please, define obscenity. Just define obscenity for me. Again, I'm very dense. Let's move on to religion. That's always a popular one. Question number 1. How long did it take God to create the world? Simple enough, isn't it? Of course it is. Question number 2. What would have happened had Jesus not been crucified? I love questions like that. Question number 3. Give me an example of a moralistic absolute. Give me an example of an absolute right and wrong. Everybody says they exist. Shouldn't be very hard at all to do that. And now, of course, the big 3 on abortion. At what point does life begin? Very popular question. Under gun control, what would happen if handguns were outlawed? And under the death penalty, always a popular one in this community, what would happen if the death penalty was abolished? Oh, my goodness, perish the thought. But nonetheless, what would happen if the death penalty were abolished? 12 simple questions back to basics night at the radio station. Pick and choose any one or 9 or 37 that you want. It's up to you. Problem is, don't call me up and say, would you go through the questions, please? Read them to me. You went through them too fast. Well, if I went through them too fast, you don't think fast enough to take part in this program. Seminole, you're on the air at WPLP.
How you doing, Bob?
Fine.
Well, okay, let me go through this here. Now, the Contra situation. Why the Contra hearings?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, well, there's probably a few reasons. One of them could be to explain to people what happened. Or then again, it could simply be a scandal to continue the Republican reign for another two more terms of 4 years by creating a scandal where Ronnie gets in trouble and has to resign, and Bush pardons him, as in the Nixon-Ford situation, and then becomes reelected. Okay, now on Gary Hart.
There's a minor problem there to start with.
There is.
Yeah, damn few people like George Bush.
Well, yeah, but see, when he brings the government back to sanity and gets rid of all the bad dogs that did everything, then everybody's going to like him. Nobody really thought much of Ford either.
Yeah, one of the reasons they didn't think too much of Ford was because he pardoned Richard Nixon, and if you'll remember, Jerry wasn't elected.
He wasn't reelected?
No.
I thought he was reelected. Oh, okay,
no, sorry about that.
Well. Okay, Gary Hart. Why does it make a difference? It makes a difference if he was guilty because running for president, he should have more sense than to make a mistake like that. That would damage his reputation.
Well, lots of people who run for president, and most of them very successfully, have made errors in judgment. I mean, as an example, Harry Truman couldn't run a simple clothing store.
Well,
but that had no effect on how he ran the country.
Yeah, but in this day and age, I think that they should be more aware because things are happening a lot faster now.
Well, let me give you a couple of more examples. Dwight David Eisenhower openly kept a girlfriend during the Second World War when it was much worse than it is today, but that certainly didn't affect his ability to run the country.
Well,
so why Gary Hart?
I'm not saying his promiscuity would affect his ability, but I'm saying that his ignorance in getting caught at it and knowing the way the moral majority works, or the way, a lot of the people in the public look at things, he should have been more intelligent than that. Maybe back during the days of other presidencies, people didn't look down on it as much as they do now, but they're
on a witch hunt now. You must be kidding me.
Come on now, the moral majority is on a witch hunt, don't you know that?
Moral majority is neither, which we all know. Pardon me for stealing a bumper sticker slogan. But the moral majority is a relatively small, insignificant force in this nation today. It is estimated that 75%, and this is from polls, from surveys, 75% of American men cheat on their wives. 50%, better than 50% of American wives cheat on their husbands. Give me a break.
Well, maybe they'll try him in the public, declare him innocent, and he'll jump back in the race. Well, anyway, okay. Well, shall we move on?
Okay.
Okay, moving on to AIDS. What should the government do about AIDS? Well, I think the government should spend more money on research for AIDS and stuff like that.
Well, that doesn't stem the AIDS epidemic.
Well, I think it'll help stem the AIDS epidemic if they decide to spend more money on that. And then when it's not approved by Congress, why don't they just pull a North and get some money like that? Or, anyway, okay, so on to teenage promiscuity. What can we do about this? Or what should be done about it? Well, I think that more publicity on AIDS will probably wrap that up. Okay, abnormal sex, homosexuality, or some type of sex act that hurts another without their permission.
Well, that's not what is normally meant by abnormal sex.
Well, you asked us to define it.
I said no. I said explain unnatural or abnormal sexual behavior.
Homosexuality.
Well, what's unnatural or abnormal about that?
It's not the purpose of sex is maybe for enjoyment, but the down the deep down purpose.
No, it's not the purpose of sex. The purpose of sex is for making babies.
That's right. That's what I was.
So therefore, I would assume that any sex that didn't make babies must therefore, by that definition, be unnatural or abnormal.
No, not if it's with the same sex, because
because that's what's comfortable to you.
Considered fondling, or considered petting, or whatever.
Well, I guess then also masturbation would fall into the abnormal or unnatural sex.
No, because there's not another person of the same sex involved. So I don't feel it to be abnormal.
Well, why is it abnormal if there's another person of the same sex involved?
Because I don't believe it to be natural.
You don't believe it to be natural?
No, that's just a personal opinion. Some people may believe.
Well, then it doesn't make it abnormal or unnatural, does it? It just makes you uncomfortable.
No, it just, in my definition, it is abnormal.
Well, why is it abnormal?
Because it's not used to reproduce, or it is used. It's used to just for pleasure, and there's another person involved.
Well, this may come as a tremendous shock to you, but probably 99.9% of sexual acts between men and women are used just for pleasure, and have nothing whatsoever to do with making babies.
This is true, but at least
therefore it must be unnatural.
But at least the opposite sex is involved. As long
so
as
what?
The opposite sex is involved.
So what? They're two human beings sexually gratifying each other. What difference does it make if they happen to both be the same sex?
Well, I guess probably because I feel like that because I was just brought up in this world to believe like that, and
someone told you to.
Well, maybe so. This is probably true. Maybe I went to church a little bit when I was a kid. Not that I'm a holy roller or anything like that, but
they used to talk about that a lot in your church?
Excuse me?
They used to talk about that a lot in your church?
No, they didn't talk about that a lot. I'll tell you the truth, it's been so long since I've been in the church, I'm not really sure what they talked about, except where, a man and a woman is okay, and definitely two men or two women is not.
Funny, in my church, it wasn't even okay for a man and a woman unless they were making babies.
Well, of course, they were supposed to be married, too, but then, that was how they looked at it when I was a child and went to church. But, things change and people change, and I just don't feel that it's necessary for people to change that much, to be changed to the extreme, with the same sex. I just,
It makes you uncomfortable.
It makes me uncomfortable, yeah, I'm sure it does, I'll agree with that,
Okay, well, at least you're honest. Thank you.
Okay, well, on to the next one here. Anyway, okay, yeah, definitely. I used to not think like that. I used to believe it was okay. People do what they want, but ever since, I don't want to blame the AIDS epidemic on anyone, but ever since the AIDS epidemic and things like that, I've become really strongly against it, and since I've become a father, I'm really against it. I think it's really, homosexuality is wrong. Okay, well anyway, so the definition of obscene, innocent people suffering or dying at the cost of others or the greed of others, for instance, Nicaragua. Okay.
Yeah, but under the sex category, define obscenity. Certainly, we wouldn't be talking about Nicaragua.
Okay, so this goes under the sex category. What's obscene? The same thing as abnormal sex. Homosexuality is obscene.
That's all that would be obscene, then?
Well, under that category.
I see. Wouldn't it be obscene to have pictures of, let's say, an older man and a young girl?
Well, something like that. That's an innocent person suffering at the cost of another, even in a sexual situation, would be considered obscene.
Okay.
Whether it be sexually suffering because of a drastic
let's say the girl was 17.
Or something
let's say the girl was 17 and the man was 35.
Well, if that's 17. I wouldn't consider that obscene. No.
16.
Probably not.
15.
No, that's pushing it.
Well, why is it pushing at 15 and not at 16? What happens magically on that 16th birthday to change that?
Well, I guess I've always thought of the sweet 16.
Well, that makes a great deal of sense. I thank you very much.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, Bob.
I know
that. But, I'm not saying that I would condone, say, my daughter or my son to go out with someone twice their age and they're 15 or 16. But if someone's parents were in on it and they were dating an older man or an older woman, I don't understand why they're doing anything wrong, as long as they had the consent of the parents. But when you're getting under 18, you're in the shaky ground there.
All right, thank you much.
Okay.
Be
you
good.
Want to continue with these?
I'd like to, but I must move along. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
To join in the conversation,
I agree with everything you say. Bob?
922.5. One open line. It's in Pinellas, 393-0057. Tampa, hi, you're on there, WPLP.
Bob?
Yes.
Enjoying your show. I'd like to take them off real quick, like contra hearings, the importance to preserve the integrity of our most important document, the Constitution of the United States, which apparently doesn't mean much to a lot of people. The importance of Hart's charges proves that the apple means more than God's advice. Stemming AIDS, they should stop improving our warfare research on DNA viruses. Promiscuity, discontinue all sex-oriented advertisements, and so on, in the interest of making profits. Abortion, since God created free will, he must have had intended that it be exercised. Abnormal sex depends on what side of the fence you're on. Obscenities, spaghetti, words depends on how you choose yourself to view them. Ignorance by far is the most obscene thing in life, and it's all around us. How long to create the world? He's still working on it. The monkey has still not become human. Jesus not being crucified. If he had not been crucified, God would have proved to us that his only son, that loving his only son, our Father who lies in heaven, must also love all of us. Moralistic absolutes, admitting that when it comes to really knowing, we know nothing. That's very honest. The death penalty, absolution of the death penalty, would prove that we truly have faith in God's 10 commandments. When did life begin? It began with the first breath of life. No breath, no life. I continue with this show. I'm standing by and enjoying it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Line open at each county. Hillsborough, 224-0057. I love calls like that. Pinellas, 393-0057. Largo, you're on here.
Yes, I'd like to answer your question on why we're having the Iran-Contra hearings.
Okay.
Well, we're having the Iran-Contra hearings because we're trying to see if a diversion of Contra money to Iran was given for the release of hostages.
Really?
And on teenage promiscuity, I think we should have the pill, education in schools, and in the home.
Okay.
Okay, and obscene, sexually obscene, is that the gist of the question, sexually obscene?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't see anything that's done for pleasure, obscene or repulsive. So I really can't tell you what that means, you know.
All right, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Two lines open in Pinellas, 393-0057. We might narrow these down to the ones that you guys are avoiding like the plague, eliminate all the others, and just get right down to the meat of it. Clearwater, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I have a question for you.
Well, that's not the purpose of tonight's program, is it?
Well,
Is it?
No.
You don't want to talk about what we're talking about, do you?
Yeah, I just want to know what's...
I don't want to know what your question is. If you can't talk about what we're talking about tonight, then,
Let's do it for
go off to somebody else.
Okay, what do you mean by part 3 of religion? Okay, I don't understand the question you're asking for number 3 of religion.
Give me an example, moralistic absolute.
Okay, what's that mean? Okay.
Well, if you don't know what it means, then you couldn't possibly begin to address the question.
Well, I just don't really understand because I had something really strange that happened to me today, and if that has to do like with immortal things happening or something.
No, it's not immortal. It's moralistic.
Moralistic.
Big difference between immortal and moral.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, think nothing of it. I didn't. Tampa, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hello, Mr. Lassiter.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question, but it is related to your program. It's about Nicaragua. Okay. Right now, I find that the Iran-Contra hearings are very interesting in that I would like to know your opinion on what we should do with Oliver North, Secord, Poindexter, and,
Well, that's not the purpose of tonight's program, though. So this is kind of asking you guys what you think.
So you want me to tell you what I think?
Have you been listening tonight?
Yes.
And you don't know what we're doing here?
No, I know what you're doing. You're asking the 12 questions.
Yes, right.
Okay, you want me to do the 12 questions then? Well, okay. The purpose of the Iran-Contra hearings, that is to further clear up the information that is not clear to the senators and congressmen in Congress right now. And it is being made public for the citizens of this country.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you agree?
Doesn't make any difference if I agree.
It doesn't.
Nope.
I think it does.
Well, unfortunately, it's my show, so I'm the one that gets to decide whether it matters or not.
Okay. Well, moving on. Gun control. I feel that if guns are not required, but not banned, and the more individuals that have guns, and the more discretion they use.
Of course, that's not what the question is at all. Question was, what would happen if handguns were outlawed?
Handguns were outlawed?
Yeah.
I feel that crime would increase.
Oh, why is that?
Because the criminals would somehow find a way to get the guns.
Well, of course, in virtually all the other Western civilized countries, handguns are outlawed. And their crime rates are much lower than ours.
Well, in our country, we have different moralistic values than they do.
Oh, I see. We're all animals over here.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, it must be the case then.
No,
there's just no other possible explanation. If they don't have handguns over there in the general population, their criminals do, by the way, if they don't have handguns in the general population, their crime rates are much lower, and we do have handguns, and our crime rates are much higher, then I guess we're animals.
No, it's just that we have
we're not as good as the British. We're not as good as the British or as civilized as the Japanese.
No, we just have a larger population, and
well, it has nothing to do with it. In terms of population, they're much more crowded than we are.
Mm-hmm. But our morals are also different.
And so I guess we don't have any morals then.
Excuse me?
Then we must not have any morals, and they do.
We have morals, but they are less moralistic than the Japanese or the British.
So in other words, we don't really have any morals, and they do.
Excuse me?
I'll try it a third and final time. We don't have any morals, and they do.
We do have morals, but we have less morals than they do.
Oh. So we hardly have any morals at all. So we have to carry guns to protect ourselves from ourselves because we're all immoral.
Well, that's what it is in the country right now.
Interesting.
The criminals are running rampant.
Of course, you are aware of the fact that most murders are not committed by criminals.
They're committed by everybody.
That's right.
And the death penalty, right now it's not working because it's not being strictly enforced and it's not being used as often as it should be.
And of course, countries that don't have the death penalty hardly have murder.
They have different means of punishing their criminals.
No, you missed my point. Murder is almost unknown in most other countries, and most other countries don't have the death penalty.
Well, that's because of their moralistic values.
I see. Interesting. Very interesting.
I just feel that the death penalty, my feeling is that if the death penalty was used a little more often, that it would deter crime.
Well, of course, in years gone by when we used the death penalty for almost everything, didn't deter it then either.
Okay, when has the death penalty been implemented in the U.S.? When did it really...
Up to 1974,
1974?
Yeah.
Okay, but there is no sign. Well, how should I say?
It was used very, very widely. It was used for all kinds of crimes, not just murder. It was used for rape. You could even theoretically, in a lot of states, get the death penalty for being a habitual burglar.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't stop anybody. It still had all those crimes back then.
It doesn't stop anybody.
Didn't then.
So you're saying it wouldn't now?
No, that's right.
So you must be anti-death penalty.
Yeah.
Well, I just feel that the death penalty is a deterrent to crime.
Well, even though it's been demonstrated to you that it isn't, you still want to feel that way.
Well,
don't you have any intellectual integrity at all?
Well, it's my opinion.
Yeah, it's your opinion based upon nothing.
Well,
I mean, I can respect an opinion that's based upon something, but if I said to you, it is my opinion that the moon is made of green cheese, then that's not an opinion worth respecting because we all know better than that.
Well, I'm sure
so if you have an opinion based upon nothing, why should anyone respect it? I mean, if you can't back up your opinion outside of, well, it's the way I want to think, so there. That's not very much of an opinion, is it?
Well, right now I'm not prepared, to give you statistics or information. So
there is no statistics or information that exists that will indicate that the death penalty is a deterrent, with one exception. There is one man who has published a report, and he happens to be affiliated and funded by some right-wingers. Affiliated with and funded by some right-wing people. But he is the only one in the entire world who's ever done a study. Everyone else who's ever done a study has indicated quite the opposite, that it has no effect as a deterrent whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
Do you know why it doesn't have an effect? It's because murderers basically fall into 5 categories, okay?
Okay.
We have the person who commits a crime of passion, i.e. in a moment of insanity, blind rage will kill, when he certainly doesn't stand around thinking about it. We have the professional murderer. He doesn't have anything to worry about because he doesn't get caught. That's why he's a professional. We have the demented murderer. You know, the guy like Billy Furry, who's crazy. No way of getting around him, is there?
Okay, so you think he can be helped?
That's not the point. We can't help people with terminal lung cancer either. Should we execute that?
Nope.
Thank you.
The phone numbers that put you on the air at WPLP are in Hillsborough County, 224-0057, in Pinellas County, 393-0057, and anywhere else, toll-free, 1-800-334-0057.
Plymouth challenges the competition with 3.7 annual percentage rate financing or up to $500 cash back on select new models in dealer stock. Get 3.7 financing or $500 cash back on Plymouth Sundance, priced $2,500 less than Honda Accord DX. Get 3.7 or $500 cash back on Plymouth Reliant, almost $2,400 less than Nissan Stanza 4-door. Plus, save up to $700 more with equipment discount packages, based on sticker price of options if purchased separately. Or get 3.7 financing or $300 back on select new Colts imported for Plymouth. These comparisons use base sticker prices, so standard equipment levels may vary. Financing available to qualified retail buyers through Chrysler Credit Corporation. Other rates are available as length of contract increases. And every American-made Plymouth comes with Chrysler's 770 Protection Plan. See limited warranty at dealer. Restrictions apply. For full details, hurry to your Chrysler Plymouth dealer.
Hi, everybody. This is Larry King in Washington. I sure hope you make a date to join me tonight. It's the start of another night and another week of Peabody Award-winning coast-to-coast listening, and we are going to begin in grand style tonight. We're going to meet one of the great stars in the history of opera, homebred in the United States, Miss Beverly Sills. Indeed, Miss Sills is not only a great opera star, but now become a great impresario in her own right. Meet Beverly Sills tonight, plus Open Phone 87, all right here on this Mutual radio station.
I disagree with everything you say, Bob.
9:38 the time. One line open. It's in Pinellas, 393-0057. Bradenton, hi, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yes, I'm talking about Gary Hart.
Okay.
My only comment is on Gary Hart is that he did a real stupid thing, but the pathetic thing is the workers that worked so hard, gave all they had.
Of course, that's not what the question is it?
What is your question?
You don't know what the question is.
No, I don't. Tell me.
But you decided to call up and answer it anyway?
Well, I turned in late. Did I miss something?
Well, apparently you did.
Well, I just...
You always have a habit of just tuning in a radio station and immediately calling up, and even when you don't know what they're talking about?
Well, I'm just trying to comment. If I'm not allowed to comment, then I must apologize. I cannot call in on a talk show and comment.
Well, you obviously can call in on a talk show and comment about what it is they're commenting on.
Well, let's talk about the Reverend Jesse Jackson. That is the front runner.
Some people just don't catch on, you know? St. Pete, you're on the air at WPLP.
Yes, Bob. I believe, as far as the Iran thing is concerned, we really have to keep a check on what's going on with, I don't care whether it's the president, whether it's the Congress, whatever. And I think that people began to realize that this was being done against the will of the people, against the will of Congress. So we absolutely have to have this kind of a thing, just like we had the McCarthy hearings. And, I mean, the McCarthy hearings were absolutely wrong. And when we finally censored him, we're having to do the same thing to keep checkmate on our president. See that he's not doing something that the people don't want. That's what I feel is the reason for the Iranian hearings.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Gary Hart is concerned, I don't think it's anybody's business what his morals are. And I think he would have been a fine president. And I'm sorry that Valiant and Herald felt like they had to go to the extreme that they did, because as far as I'm concerned, I really don't care what he does in his own spare time. I care what he stands for, what he's going to do for the people of the United States.
Well, I think the Miami Herald might better serve not only their community, but all communities in the country had they spent as much time and effort in seeking out the candidates' stands and views than their sexual habits.
Well, this is what I feel, because I feel, and I have studied what he stood for and what he does stand for. And I know that he will be, if people can be open-minded enough to realize that he is a very fine man and will be a fine president.
You know, I'm starting to have a feeling deep down in my gut, and I have nothing to base this on, nothing whatsoever, that Gary Hart is not out of the 1988 race.
I certainly hope not, because, as I said, I didn't happen to become one of his campaign workers, but I certainly would have voted for him.
I thank you much.
And the other thing is that I feel that the only way we can take care of the AIDS situation is education, education, and education. And make people realize, and also to stop this panic and scare and fear and the kind of thing that they're doing to anybody who has it. I mean, it's an illness, just like anything else. And it's the compassion of human beings for human beings who are in an extremely bad situation. This, to me, is a very important thing. And instead of saying, you know, the child can't go to school and the person can't be in a nursing home or anything like this, I think we should say these are people who are hurting, and let's do what we can for them.
I thank you.
Alrighty.
Be good.
Thank you.
Largo, your turn at WPLP.
Me?
Yeah.
Geez, I got here in a hurry.
Well, that's because everybody dropped off.
You're kidding.
No, it was quite serious.
Well, I think all your subjects are real interesting, and for once in my life, I'm not driving in my car, and I can comment. I think the Contra hearing is taking place because I think it's probably political, number one. I think the Democrats have got their hands on something. I think this is a perfect forum for them to show us what's been going on.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying not to overstep their bounds and impinge on the office of the presidency, but we're certainly getting a look-see as to the management style, if you excuse the euphemism, of the president, and exactly how lackadaisical. And I'm always just shocked at the arrogance of people who get into high places. As far as Mr. Hart is concerned, I haven't heard anybody comment on it. It's strictly a personal point of view from me. I am always appalled when I read the stories of the women who are involved with these men. and they're kind of a lost cause. I think women have yet to become equal partners, equal people, equal anything. And somehow she's smiling in camera and saying it was okay with her. You know damn well in her heart it wasn't okay with her, and the very fact that their marriage sounds so tenuous to me makes me think that it certainly isn't okay. But she's saying that for the public to hear. And I just think that we're finally going to get to a place where we make such an issue of the fact that the family is breaking up. It's that kind of behavior that doesn't do families any good. And Eleanor Roosevelt was in a state of depression over what he was doing. And she wasn't the first. You read the lives of the autobiographies of some of these women who had men that behaved like that. And particularly when it's so hypocritical. No, not, it's such hypocrisy when they say they're going to church and they believe in all the tenets of the church and then they go out and behave like animals. And I think we need to look into the fact that men seem to need still to behave like animals. Nobody ever brings that up. You know, if women can behave themselves and have to control themselves, why can't men? Sex, what you said, unnatural sex acts, I really can't think of any. If it's consenting adults, I can't think of any. And that dissertation by that young person on homosexuality, obviously, it was his opinion, he's entitled to it, but there's no compassion in that. It's just crazy to come down on the homosexuals because they don't behave like you do. I can't define obscenity. I'm like the judge who said he can't tell you about it, but he sure knows it when he sees it. Religion, first of all, I think that the whole idea of Jesus Christ was invented, and that'll endear me to millions. And so I don't think that he was crucified. If he was, it wasn't, it was written about 100 years later, and who remembers who did what when. So I don't believe any of that. If he came again, it would be in some other mode, because it's like all these religious groups. They invent something to suit their needs at the time. Let's see, what else did you say? Oh, about abortion. Well, I don't think anybody knows when life begins. Certainly when a baby the fetus is in the womb, it's not supportable. And it can't make it without its mother. Now they've got it down to how many grams. And if you read the stories of the intensive care where they take those newborns and you know what they go through and what they do to keep them alive and what they suffer after they live, I sometimes think, and I think they do too, the people who care for them, it's not worth it. They spend millions, and those kids wind up brain damage. They have respiratory problems. They sometimes have nerve damage to the point where they're paralyzed, but they did save them. So, that goes on the record as a save. But I'm not...
Well, once again, when we go through that type of activity, we are, quote-unquote, saving the infant for the sake of the parents. It's for somebody else. When we save a fetus from being aborted, it's for somebody else. Nobody gives a damn what happens to that fetus once it is born.
And there are books out, real recent, within the last year, telling you how those infants, if and when they survive, and they finally get so tired fighting for their lives, and they're stuck with me. If you go look in the intensive care at some of those babies, and even the parents are willing to let them go, but the hospital personnel can't let them go for all kinds of reasons. They don't want to let them go. Maybe their records don't look as good. And that's not the end of it. When they get out of there, they're not all perfect, grown-ups. They have all sorts of problems they live with for the rest of their life because we need to prove that we can save them. But we give poor prenatal care. We have a low birth rate here in this country. We've got all sorts of things wrong that we could take care of that wouldn't cost nearly the millions of dollars it takes to save, quote, these savable infants. So, and as far as abortion is concerned, I will take to the streets, and I'm way past the age where it matters, but I will take to the streets if they ever take that right away from women. It's our one chance to be really autonomous and be equal in a world where we have been scum. And it doesn't matter what they say about women. If you watch how we've been treated for years and years and years, especially when we're older, we're really just totally discarded. And there's nothing that you can get back at. If you have no money and you aren't particularly as attractive as some young people are, you are totally overlooked. So this world has got a lot of work to do, and particularly in this country. What else did you ask about?
I'm not telling.
Got him. The death penalty. Well, I'll tell you one thing that would sell me on not getting rid of the death penalty, and that is when they interview these here incarcerates, they'll tell you right off the bat that they'd rather be killed. They don't want to spend their lives in prison, and if they do away with the death penalty and let them know that they for sure will be there for life, I think then we'll see crime go down. And, it's just like you said, the ones that do it are out of their minds. They're sick people. Why don't we spend the billions to examine these people and find out how come we produce these in our society. What are we doing that's wrong? And we keep making so many, and now we're making even more of them. We haven't even got places to put them. So, I certainly do enjoy your show, and even though I can't talk on it or, express myself very often, I'm always listening, and I just think that I love your program, and I love your guests, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Sarasota, your turn at WPLP.
Bob?
Yes.
With regards to the Gary Hart issue. Assuming, and that's a big assumption, that he has whatever he has done, or any candidate. If a candidate, be it male or female, would in fact cheat on their spouse, is this the type of person that we want in public office?
Do you have, could you tell me what some of Gary Hart's main tenets were in his campaign, what his main positions were?
No, I couldn't.
Could you tell me about Joseph Biden's?
No.
Pierre
Not
DuPont?
studied the candidates at all, no. Not yet.
So you know nothing about the candidates, but you're pretty darn sure, based upon some newspaper articles, that that's not the kind of guy you want as president.
What I'm saying is the issues aside. For example...
Well, obviously, in this case, they have to be aside. You don't know what they are.
When Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980, and again in 84, I think the large majority of middle America assumed he was a just, honorable,
the large majority of middle America chose to ignore his indiscretions, past and current.
And look where we are now. If a human being would cheat on a spouse, what would ever keep them from cheating?
No. I quite beg to differ with you. You see, Ronald Reagan's sexual indiscretions back in the 1940s or 50s have nothing whatsoever to do with his ability to run the country. So not only did we choose to ignore his indiscretions, but we also chose to ignore what he was saying. Because he clearly told us that he didn't have the vaguest idea what he was up to.
I understand that. So you think, would you say then a person's moral stature has little or no effect then on their ability to govern?
Well, I'm not quite sure I know what morals are. You see, I first of all, I don't even know if Gary Hart is impotent or potent. I don't know if Gary Hart and his wife have an arrangement. I don't know if Gary Hart really did anything with anybody. I don't know any of those things. And there's a good reason I don't know them, because they're none of my damn business. The only business I really have in determining whether or not a man is fit to be president of the United States is looking at his record that would indicate if he understands the problems, if he has workable solutions for the problems, and what he does on his own time, frankly, isn't much concern of mine.
Well, which he did. He had some very good solutions, I believe. And I think he had some, good plans and a good so-called vision of the future.
I thought you didn't know what his platform was.
Well, I'm not going to sit there and go, issue, one after another with you. Okay? Because I'm not that schooled in every issue. What I'm saying is when a person decides to run for office and to be a public servant and to be an employee of the citizens of this country, don't we as employers then have some right to know about this person's character?
Does your employer have a right to dump you because you have a little fling?
And done it's been done many times. Not to me, but of course, you can understand to many, many people. But this is a person that we're not putting, I am not someone who is running for the President of the United States. I am not there to govern or to pretend to govern 240 million people.
I thought all we asked of him was to, defend and uphold the laws of the land. I didn't quite understand that also somewhere in there we snuck in a little clause about and keep your pants on. I was a plumber.
Right.
Or a bookkeeper. It makes no difference. And during the course of the interview, let's say it was a plumber, and they said, well, do you know how to join pipe fittings together? That's an appropriate question. Do you know what the codes are in this county? That's an appropriate question. But if they were then to ask you, And how many times have you fooled around on your wife? First of all, that they have no business asking that question, and if they did ask it, you could sue them.
Right.
And win.
I agree.
So why double standard here?
I think when you run for a position of that importance, that you have to realize that your life is going to be an open book, that you're going to be subject to incredible scrutiny, and that you should at least try to have your ducks in order.
Well, again,
and not challenge the
let me
follow you.
Again, let me jump in here. I'm not trying to embarrass you, because I'll sit here and tell you with egg on my face, but nonetheless, I will sit here and tell you I would be real hard-pressed if you asked me what were some of the main tenets of Gary Hart's campaign, okay? I'll tell you that right up front. I'd be real hard-pressed to answer you. So I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just trying to make a point. And the point is that you don't know what the hell he stood for. I don't know what the hell he stood for. I couldn't tell you about Joe Biden either, by the way. I can tell you about Pierre DuPont because his three main tenets are just so absurd that, they stuck in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the real point is here, we all are ready to come down on Gary Hart for something that each and every one of us would say, hey, it ain't none of your business if you were talking about me. And none of us really know. And we don't know because the press has done a very poor job of telling us what in the hell the man stood for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you really wanted to go out of your way, you could find out. I've got a magazine at home, a 3 or 4 month old copy of Atlantic that will give me in great detail where everybody stands on every issue. I read the article, but to tell you the truth, I've already forgotten. And I'm just like the rest of us. I don't know.
Well, you know what, Bob, why we don't know? It's too early. My God, we're how far away are we from the first primaries?
But I dare say that most of us still won't know the day before the election.
I will know, and you will know.
Yes, I will know by then.
But when we start the '88 election in '86, it's a little early.
Well, maybe Gary had something that we might all listen to in his resignation speech or withdrawal speech, whatever kind of speech it was, when he said, we've got to change the process. There's something awful wrong.
Yeah, well, no, I like Gary Hart, and I probably would have voted for Gary Hart, based on what I know up to this point.
I liked his ideas. I didn't like him, because I didn't think he was electable. But his ideas, as I recall reading them, and I'm sitting here telling you, I don't remember what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But his ideas, as I recall reading them, I mean, I'm laying in bed reading it, 12:30 in the morning, and I wake up my wife and say, hey, this guy Hart makes sense.
Right.
But I've already forgotten what it was. And it's my job.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Sure.
I'm related to Gary Hart.
Sure.
Capital punishment.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a hardliner, but when is the last time that we have had, and of course, every year 2 or 3 or a half dozen people are executed. It's front page news. It's a headline story on the network news. But when have we had a very enforceable capital punishment system in this country where the hundreds and thousands of people on death row have actually been executed?
How old are you?
40.
Half of your lifetime? 3/4 of your lifetime?
That we have executed more than 6 or 8 people?
You better believe it. Used to fry them like they were going out of style.
Well, I can only recall a half dozen or so a year. And it's always headline news.
Well, that's because after the death penalty was outlawed, then when it came back, it came in with very, very stiff standards. But prior to its being outlawed, a decade and a half ago, they were frying them left and right. We always had. We always had.
You see, I'm unaware of that. I'm against the death penalty.
And of course,
I don't know that we have really, to my recollection.
And I know this sounds awfully trite, but it happens to be true to give you some insight into the criminal mind. Years ago, in Paris, they used to behead pickpockets in public. And everybody from the town would go to the public square to watch it happen. And the pickpockets had a field day. That's the criminal mind. We're not dealing with people who think like you and I do. And so, the death penalty is not a deterrent.
See, my premise was, and I don't say that I agree with the death penalty, but my premise was we have had kind of a blasé death penalty for the last 10, 15, 20 years
10.
that it has not been really enforced?
A couple hundred people in the country have been executed.
Now, what percentage of that is, though, the people, would you say, that are on death row?
Roughly 10%. So slightly under. But it's close enough to call it 10%.
And of course, most of the people that are on death row are hardened criminals that if they're not, they have no future anyhow. Would you agree to that?
Yeah.
They have nowhere to go, so
They have no right to live.
Execute them or keep them alive. It really doesn't make any difference.
They have no right to expect to live. There's just one problem. Who has the right to take a life?
To take their life.
Yeah.
Right. Bob, I enjoy your show very much. I've only started listening the last couple of months, and I have about 6 or 8 people that listen to you every night now, because I told them how much I enjoy you, and we're sitting here right now listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. He's the kind of guy that makes the show what it is.
Station. This is John Eastman inviting you to join us here on WPLP News Talk.
The mere mention of his name starts arguments at bingo parlors around town. He's the top-rated Tampa Bay talk show host. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce Mr. Bob Lassiter.
7 minutes after the hour of 10 o'clock. Welcome back. Third and final hour of the Bob Lassiter Show for this Monday, May the 11th, 1987. We'll kind of throw it open this hour. There's some nights you're just not really into it. Tonight's one of those nights, just not really into it. I must admit, though, to bitter disappointment, there were 3 questions I'd really hoped out of the 12 that people would jump on silly me. Explain unnatural or abnormal sexual behavior. That was one of them. What would have happened had Jesus not been crucified? I think we all know why no one wanted to answer that one, because we all know the answer to it, don't we? That's why I put the question in there. And the third one, give me an example of moralistic absolutes. You know, everybody likes to run around saying, "Oh, those secular humanists, they teach that there aren't any moral absolutes." Well, I'd like to know what some of them are. Very simple. I'd like to know what, a moral absolute is. And my goodness, the polls would tell us that somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% of the people listening would be of that opinion, and I thought that, perchance they could explain that to us, but they have chosen to stay in their little cubby holes tonight. Such is life. You win some, you lose some. You know what I mean? Oh, I tell you. One line open, it's in Pinellas, 393-0057, 393-0057, and it just filled up as we spoke. Hi, Largo, you're on the air at WPLP.
How's So Far doing, Bob?
So far, it's doing great. Doing great. Petitions are coming in droves, and we still have some to get out.
Sorry to see Edwin Meese is not doing as well.
Well, gee, I thought he was doing very well.
Well, not exactly. They're bringing his name into this Contra affair. Supposedly, he was one of the persons that knew about it.
Well, I think we've known that for quite some time.
Well, then he's not doing too good then, is he?
Well, I guess it all depends on how you look at it. Now, he's still in office, still drawing his paycheck.
So's the president.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that's kind of a double standard on the president's part?
Well, would you expect me to say something otherwise?
No, not really.
I mean, if nothing else, I'm consistent.
A moralistic absolute?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be kind of like a lie?
No, it's kind of like an oxymoron is what it really is. Moralistic absolutes. There are no absolutes in life. Because there are circumstances that have to be taken into consideration. So sometimes lies, are wrong, and sometimes they're very necessary.
Well, in the Iran-Contra hearings, did you hear McFarland say that it was necessary to lie?
Oh, yes. The president has said the same.
Do you agree with that?
Of course not.
Don't you think that's absolute? That we don't agree with that?
A moralistic absolute is saying that lying is wrong, that it's a sin. Well, in some cases it is, in some cases it isn't.
Well, I don't know. That's a hard one.
There's nothing hard about it. I mean, suppose your child comes to you tonight and says, let let me have $1 tomorrow to buy candy, and you say to the kid, I don't have $1, which is a lie. You know, that's not terribly bad, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the kid should know he shouldn't be eating candy. If I didn't want him
Well, perchance it wasn't the greatest example I might have been able to give off the top of my head, but I think you get my point. I would hope.
Okay. All right, I'll accept your point. But today, what do you think is going to be the answer to McFarland's last question there? That the Senate Chief Counsel Lyman gave him. What do you think is going to be the answer to?
I'm not clairvoyant. I haven't the vaguest idea, but I certainly look forward to it.
Yeah, so do I.
I thank you much.
Goodbye.
Be good. One line open. It's in Pinellas, 393-0057, 393-0057. Clearwater, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm calling about your abortion category.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to tell your listeners a story regarding...
I'm not interested in your telling my listeners stories.
Okay, not a story, well, true story at that.
I'm not interested in your telling my listeners stories. If you want to tell stories, get your own radio show.
Well, okay, not a story. How about reality? About a woman who was told to have an abortion, and she...
Yeah, well, I can tell you all kinds of stories, but this isn't swap stories night.
Well, no, I don't want to swap stories with you.
I'm sure you don't, because you just want to get your point of view across.
Well, you've got yours across.
That's right. It's the Bob Lassiter show. It says so right on the top of the paper.
Well, the reality is...
If you would like to challenge something I said, well, then I'd be delighted to sit here. But if you want to swap stories, and tell me some blood-curdling story, I can give you equally blood-curdling stories on the other side, and that proves nothing, does it?
Not a blood-curdling story. Pretty dramatic story.
Well, okay, dramatic stories. We can swap dramatic stories from now until the station goes off the air.
Well,
however, it proves nothing, does it?
A woman who was told to have an abortion but decided against it.
I was going to try it anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't feel like listening to him. Tampa, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hello?
Hello.
Good evening, Bob. I just drove fast, and I heard your radio station on my way driving home. Sorry I have a slight cold. I got a few notes. I wanted to respond to a few of your questions. Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. First thing is about the religion, about Jesus if it was not crucified. I am not a Christian myself. However, I grew up in a Catholic school for about 12 years. And I believe that Jesus or Muhammad or Moses, they were all really something in your heart that you all have to believe in, just to keep yourself in order. And just to use it as a way to guide us. Not necessarily the exact way, however, use the things that's good for you in them. And use it for your betterness.
Well, I don't see how that's addressing the question. What would have happened had Jesus not been crucified?
Probably he has been another type of legend, and another prophet have another type of ending. So did as other prophets have. Another ending with another good effect in the life of people. Probably he would be maybe die in a natural way, maybe in another way being sacrificed for some other human. Somehow the way they come and the way they go affects people, I believe.
Okay.
No matter how they go. The other thing is about the death penalty. I'm sorry if I have a kind of a bad voice. I have a slight cold.
You're doing fine.
Thank you. Death penalty, to me, should be there. It's probably the sound of it is more important than it itself. It's a capital punishment that really makes people think twice. Now, I'm not talking about the cycles not those, because that's a different story. However,
you want to tell me that you didn't kill? You want to tell me that you didn't kill anybody today because there's a death penalty in the state of Florida? But if there wasn't one, you might have killed somebody?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
No, why didn't you kill somebody today?
I never tried to kill somebody. Why don't I just go?
I know you've never tried to kill somebody. I know you would never try to kill somebody because you're a moral man.
No,
but people who have no morals and would kill people are not in the least bit intimidated by death penalties.
Unless they are professionals or they are, as you say, temporarily out of mind.
Are you a Muslim by any chance?
I am, I can say, maybe
let's put it this way. Officially, I'm a Muslim. However, I never practiced that.
Well, there are Muslim nations that execute people who commit adultery, and it doesn't stop people from committing adultery.
Well, that is a barbarian thing, executing on those cases. That is a barbarian rule.
But nonetheless, it's a rule. And nonetheless, and in some countries it goes on. And nonetheless, in those countries it doesn't stop adultery.
Well, let me tell you something. It doesn't stop anything. Let's say in an Arabic country, they cut a man's hand for stealing, regardless of what the reason is, okay? That is barbarian. It's not accepted at this time.
I know it's barbarian, but the point is it doesn't stop thievery.
Sure it doesn't stop, but we cannot say it doesn't even slow it down. If there was no rule, then where would we be? What would happen to us? There should be always a limit. Then they pass the limits, of course. But what about if there is no limit? Then what happens?
No one suggested that there be no laws. No one suggested that there be no punishment.
Sure. Well, what kind of punishment do you suggest for someone who rapes 5 girls and kills them and ditches them? What kind of punishment do you suggest them? 5 years and then probation?
Well, first of all, there's virtually no place in the state of Florida where there is no place in the state of Florida where such a punishment would be handed out. Zero. That's something that it just doesn't enter into the conversation.
And you mean for the death penalty?
No. If you raped 5 people and got caught and murdered some of them,
yes,
you would go to jail for life.
For life.
Not 5 years. For life.
For life. However, after 10 years, you have a chance of probation.
You're wrong. There is no chance for parole until 25 years.
25 years?
For each case. So if there were 5, that would be 125 years before there was any consideration at all for parole.
Okay. So you are sure that there has never been a case that the man has raped and killed someone?
Not what I said at all. It's not what I said at all. We're talking about here and now, not what might have happened.
No, I mean, yeah, right now.
Years ago.
Okay, then that's great. That's great. I respect that law.
It's a good law.
There are few cases that really, it's difficult
now,
for us to
from time to time,
honestly, are a part of it.
From time to time, people having a conversation like this will bring up the lunatic state of California, where such a thing that you just described could happen in California. Well, what in the hell that has to do with us in Florida is beyond me.
Well, it happens everywhere. It depends to people, It's not where it happens. It happens in Europe. You were discussing something about,
Yes, but the instances of violent crime in Europe are far, far, far lower than they are here.
Sure, because they are far smaller than us.
Per capita, sir, per capita, they are far lower than they are here, the instances of violent crime. Obviously, I'm not going to try to describe or compare a country of 3 million people with a country of 250 million.
Yes,
per capita, they are lower than they are here.
And one other thing I believe is, probably in our social life is happening, I believe. How many times you watch TV, all this murder, all this, you know what I mean? Those, I believe, has an effect. It has,
well, the same shows are shown in Europe.
I lived in England. I lived in England for about 5 years. There has never been that many of these type of shows there. Not at all.
Well, no, there's not the proliferation of them, but nonetheless they are shown.
Sure they are. But more.
They also have other things to watch, and we don't.
Yes, but there is more restrictions. One thing is in here we have is freedom, and I believe we have to pay for it somehow, unfortunately. There are people...
That's a very peculiar way for you to pay for watching a violent show is by taking someone else's life.
Oh, not for me, but I can be the victim. I can be the victim, can't I?
Well, yes, you can, but you're not the victim. However, when somebody is executed in the state of Florida and you're a resident of the state of Florida, they're being executed in your name. You might as well be the one pulling the switch.
If I believe that what I'm doing is right, most probably I will. And then maybe I'm wrong. And then
well, maybe the guy who killed that person thought he was right, too. Maybe the murderer thought he was right, so, what kind of an explanation is that?
That's where the law comes in. And they say, okay, this is right, and we do it. And they do it. It's a matter of maybe the law, who's right.
No, what it is it's a double standard here. It's wrong for one person to kill, but it's okay for another.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Oh.
It is wrong for both people to kill. However, one does it under the name of law for reasons that is accepted with the majority, I believe, of people. If not, they wouldn't put that law there.
It doesn't make it right, though, does it?
Sorry?
doesn't make it right, does it?
Well, it sure does.
Oh, it does. Well, you see, there was a time when we used to think that keeping slaves, and the majority of people thought that was okay.
No, because it has been done by the system that has been appointed.
Yeah, well, it was the system that said it was okay to keep slaves, too. And the majority of people said, hey, that's fine with me since I'm not a slave.
And then they stopped it.
Yeah, we had a war to stop it.
Exactly. That's what we have to pay for it. That's what I mean. That's what we have to pay for it.
Well, thank you very much. Take care. Is it me? Or is it them? 10:25 the time. Before I go any further, I would be remiss if I did not thank Mitch for the cheesesteak. Mitch, I don't know where you got it. It was the best cheesesteak I've ever had in my life. And of course, the Mad Dog treats are always appreciated. Thank you very much, Mitch. And that's my friend Mitch at My Rosamico, which I have still yet to visit because I can't figure out where the hell it is. But as soon as I do, I will stop by and say hello. I don't know what it is. Let's be honest with each other. I haven't enjoyed myself for a week. The last show I did that I walked out of the studio and said, hey, I really enjoyed that was 1 week ago tonight. And we have had 5 since then. I sit here and I stare at the microphone and I say, what? What did they say? Why did they say that? Why did they call me? So, it's either me or you guys. I'm not sure which it is, but it's one of us. And I've tried light shows, I've tried heavy shows, I've tried in-between shows. Anyway, back to the phones we go. It's open for the remainder of this hour, any place you want to go. 2 lines open, they're both in Pinellas, 393-0057. I don't promise to understand what you're saying, but I haven't understood all week, and we've somehow gotten through. Bradenton, hi, you're on the air, WPLP.
Yes, good evening, Bob. Good show as usual. I noticed that most of your questions are designed to be answered either with a knee-jerk response or a well-thought-out one. It's kind of interesting to see which way they drop. Personally, I don't think the death penalty has ever prevented anybody from doing anything. There was a death penalty in Rome that didn't stop them from manipulating the Christ issue around until they got him nailed to the cross. I don't think that it's been ever proven by anybody that it's been a deterrent to any sort of crime. I think the whole Gary Hart thing is a tragedy, not only for himself personally, whatever his motives sexually or politically may have been. I think it's a tragedy that we have nailed this guy because I think it was totally hypocritical. How many of the people who did the nailing have done exactly the same thing for a lot less?
I found myself when the story first broke saying, yeah, throw the bum out. That's no good. But in the last week, as I've had a tad of time to think about it, what damn difference does it make?
Am I correct in assuming that we're on sort of an open phone here thing now?
Yeah, right now we are.
Okay, I'm carrying around...
Talk about cookie recipes, I don't care.
I'm carrying around petitions so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's been quite interesting to me. I've had to point out to people, for instance, that there were committees of correspondence before we ever had formal legislation in this country that people should be able to read, think, speak, whatever they choose, as long as it doesn't harm anybody. And I fail to see where various things do harm people, whether they're presented as a talk show or a magazine or a TV program or just a general discussion. I find that it's incredible to me how many people really don't care about this issue. They don't think there is an issue. They think, well, the broadcaster should be a self-policing entity anyway, and if they're not doing it, somebody else should step in and do it. I've gone back and read the original guidelines for the FCC, first the Radio Act in 27 and the FCC in 34. Mm-hmm. I've read a lot of Haynes' comments, who was the first commissioner of the FCC, and they were primarily interested in regulating commercial lengths, wave bands, that sort of thing. I don't think they really had any intention on the original time. Of course, they had the power to enforce this type of thing, but I don't think they really had the intention. I think this has been something that's kind of foisted itself from special interest groups, right-wing.
No, not only did the commission not have the intention, but Congress clearly had the intent that the commission would not interfere?
Well, under wartime radio acts, of course, there were a lot of things that came under immediate censorship. But that was such a totally different circumstance, and it was revoked after the war was lifted. All those things, they were dismantled. But I don't know. I just find the whole thing rather bizarre. I think it's bizarre to me. I mean, it's very bizarre that you cannot go in and buy a Penthouse or a Playboy magazine in Sarasota or Manatee counties. You really have to look for it. To me, this is incredible.
Well, in Lee County, you absolutely...
I get my jollies that
in Lee County, Florida, you cannot buy one, period. It is against the law in Lee County, that's where Fort Myers is, to sell Penthouse, Playboy, Hustler, right on down the line.
Oh, I find that astonishing. And then couple that with the other side of the coin of these people who don't see it as an inroad on free speech, of course. They see it as, oh, well, that's good. At least the kids won't see it now. Oh, please, give me a break. I mean, most of our founding fathers had something to do with clerical duties. They either came from a line of clergy. When do we stop nailing people for our own sins? I mean, I think it's horrible.
I couldn't agree more. And I thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm going to keep those petitions rolling.
Please do.
Good night.
Take care. Tampa 224-0057, Pinellas 393-0057. Hi, Tampa, you're on the air, WPLP.
Oh, Bob, I love this show. You remember that show you had a couple of weeks back where you said you were going to fight old ladies that wore pantyhose with sandals?
Oh, yes.
My God, I was at work. Well, I did listen at work. I can't listen at work. I was in such a bad mood. I got in the car, I was driving home, and I laughed so hard people in the cars on the side of me were looking at me.
Well, it's not so bad, those, that wear the clear toes, but almost all of them have the reinforced toes. It's ugly.
I'd get $20 for that tape. I would. Do you ever sell any tape?
No, we do not.
Oh, I would give $20 for that tape. That was the funniest thing I have ever heard in my life. You are so smart. And
No, just a man of taste.
Well, you're very smart because I agree with everything you say, but I can't put it in words. I'd give anything if I could just tow you around and have you speak to people I talk to.
Well, if you have enough money, that could be worked out.
I mean, you know everything. I want to ask you a question. Do you think there is any absolutes at all of any kind? Because I have thought for 2 years and tried to find one, and I can't find one.
No, there's right and there's wrong, but I don't know of any absolutes.
I can't think of one. I defy anybody to give me one. Do they have the nerve to even try?
Well, if you've listened tonight, you can see that they haven't. I did my damnedest to sucker them into it.
I mean, do they think murder is a sin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they had a chance to murder Hitler at that time, would they have murdered Hitler? Of course they would.
I hope so, although some of those people I'm not so sure of.
I mean, I can't think of anything. The only thing I could think of would be an absolute was to be cruel. But then, wonder if you're a dentist. Is it cruel to pull out somebody's wisdom tooth and cause them pain?
Well, besides, there are times when that's the only way you can get rid of someone after you have tried everything else. Then you must be cruel.
So there's no absolutes. I can't think of
any.
I cannot think of one, and I've tried because I thought surely there's one.
Well, for simple-minded people who don't stop to think about it, it's very easy to say absolutes. The secular humanists, they said there are no absolutes.
I know. And I had an argument with my brother. He said it was an absolute. He said that the teacher at his kid's school was teaching it was that stealing was was all right in some cases. And he said, that's terrible. I said, well, I kind of think that maybe in some cases it's not, it's not all that bad.
Exactly. I can think of lots of instances, and so can the law.
I mean, suppose you lived in South America, and this real rich landowner took all of his food that he was growing his crops and put it in a field and said, I'm going to let that food rot. And I dare any peasant to even try to get it. Would it be absolutely wrong for a mother that her child is starving to death to crawl over the fence and get a potato to feed her child? I don't believe that. I don't think God would even hold that against her. I do not believe it. There's not one thing that you could think of that's absolute.
Absolutely. That's the only absolute I can think of.
Okay, now, let me see. I want to tell you, your producer is very nice.
He's the best.
He was very nice to me. And
9:39 the time. We have an interesting challenge on line 4 out of Tampa. A gentleman says to my producer, if he can demonstrate to me an absolute, would I quit the show tonight? Of course, I accept all challenges like that. Tampa, go for it.
Okay, good evening, Bob.
Good evening.
I can understand you talking about stealing if you're starving and killing Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've read an absolute in the paper, a case not so long ago, which was of a gentleman of the age of 90.
Well, no, wait a second. Are we talking about a case or something across the board?
Something across the board.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this case, which would go across the board, was of a 19-year-old, the boyfriend of the girl, having sex with an 11-week-old child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that child now is in very serious condition with an infection.
Absolutely, I can understand that.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, would anybody out there have any excuse or reason for that sort of action?
Well, as a matter of fact, there is one guy that would. And he's a higher authority than... Do you believe in God, by the way?
I think I'm like you. I'm not sure.
You're not sure you believe in God?
I'm not sure there is one.
Well, you see, but unfortunately, in the good book, there are quite a number of instances where God told his chosen people to take all of the virgins of a defeated people for their own use.
Do you believe in the Bible?
Do I believe in the Bible? No, I'm just telling you what other people believe in.
No, I want somebody out there to come out and say that they agree with that's not an absolute. Would you say that's not an absolute? I'm not talking Bible, I'm not talking any religion, I'm not talking any sect.
Well, I don't know of anyone that would tell you, outside of perhaps, God the Father, who used to send the children of Israel to do such a thing. I don't know of anyone that would tell you that that is okay.
Is that not an absolute?
Is that not an absolute? It's not a moral absolute. No, moral absolutes are thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. They're moral absolutes, not thou shalt not rape an 11-month-old child. Give me a break.
11 weeks.
Or 11 weeks. Or 11 years.
I mean, I would say...
But that's not what people are talking about when they say moral absolutes. There is no one, utterly no one outside of a lunatic that would excuse such behavior. That is socially unacceptable. It always has been, it always will be.
So we're talking sex with children as an absolute?
No, sir, we're not. That is not a moral absolute in the view of the religionist. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not commit murder. They are moral absolutes. There is no one, sir, that says it's okay to rape an 11-week-old child. That's not a moral absolute. That is a socially unacceptable. Always has been, always will be. It is in any society. Any society.
Yeah.
And it's not a moral absolute. So you'll lose the bet.
I think you're just playing with the words.
No, I'm not playing with the words, sir. You apparently don't know what moral absolutes are.
Well, you're talking the Ten Commandments.
That's right, sir.
So that thou shalt not murder.
Mm-hmm.
That's a moral absolute.
But there are exceptions to that, sir.
What? Tell me one exception.
Well, I'll borrow the one that my last caller just used. If you had had the opportunity to murder Hitler during the Second World War, would you?
No.
Well, then you're a bigger butcher than me.
No, because the English had chances of killing Hitler. They would not kill Hitler. Do you know why? They could have killed him on a number of occasions. You know why they wouldn't kill Hitler? Because we could not have won the war. Because the generals would have took over.
Would it have been wrong to kill Hitler?
Wrong to kill Hitler?
Uh-huh.
Yes, because the war would have gone on and on and on. The war would not have ended because the generals...
I'm afraid that you don't quite understand your history very well, because the last year and a half, 2 years of Hitler's reign, his generals were against him. He was losing the war. They knew it, and they wanted to end it with peace to save as much of Germany as possible.
Oh, his generals, yes. I'm talking about the British. In beginning of the war and through the war, they would not kill Hitler.
Well, I didn't ask you what they would do. I said you.
No, for that reason.
Oh.
And if anybody who does believe in a God, they would rather die themselves, surely, than break one of his laws.
Are you in favor of capital punishment?
No. Because it's not a deterrent.
I mean, there's been a poll recently.
Oh, is that the only reason you're against it?
Morally it's wrong. I don't think we have the right to take another life.
Uh-huh.
And there's been a poll recently which people would rather be put to death than serve a lifetime imprisonment. So therefore it'd be more of a deterrent to tell people that...
Well, that's a very invalid poll, because unless you got the guy sitting in a chair and he's strapped in and you're ready to pull this switch,
of course,
it's one of those answers that, it just doesn't count.
Okay, but I'm just talking what the poll is and what people would say. The thing is, if people would rather be electrocuted than spend a long time in prison, if that's what the people think, therefore it'd be better to turn around and say to these people, hey, if you commit murder, we're not going to put you down, you can rot and spend the rest of your life in prison. If they feel that they would rather not spend their time in prison than they would be electrocuted, therefore that would be a better deterrent than...
Well, let's go back to this moral absolute for a moment. Let me give you a real good chance to dig your own grave here. Let us go back to the setting of World War II, all right?
Yeah.
And you just happen to be at, Auschwitz.
Yeah.
But you're not an inmate.
No.
You're not an inmate. You just happen to be there.
Yeah.
And there you are standing next to the man ready to throw the tablets into the shower room.
Yeah.
The poison gas tablets, crystals, whatever they were.
Yeah. I've been through this one before many years ago. Go on.
Would you have killed him?
No.
To stop him from doing it?
No.
Amazing.
I'd go in myself.
Amazing.
I'd rather go in the door and just die and have done with it, because if you're in that sort of situation, you know yourself you wouldn't stop the murders if you killed everyone that threw the tablet in. You would not stop them killing.
What a great humanitarian.
I'd just jump in. There was plenty of people at the time who jumped in the fires. They couldn't stand it anymore. They didn't even try to kill the people who were doing the killing. They just jumped in the pits, and they wanted to go into the gas chambers themselves, so they just couldn't stand it anymore. If you're in that sort of situation, I think I'd rather be dead than living in that anyway. I think I'd rather say shoot me. And it comes again as another point with the
No, it's another one of those.
No,
it's another one of those futile questions, like, would you rather be executed or spend life in prison? It's one of those things that's very difficult to answer until you're there.
Of course, I admit that. But the thing is, if people would rather be electrocuted than spend their time in prison, if they thought that was the punishment, it doesn't matter whether or not they think at the time, oh, I'd rather live than be electrocuted because I'm in the chair. If people think that they would rather be electrocuted than spend their time in prison, then let's tell the people, you will spend your time in prison. If that's a better deterrent, whether or not it comes to the point, oh, I don't want to be electrocuted now, I'd rather be in my cell for the next 50 years. That's not the point. If people actually think that they would rather be electrocuted than spend their time in prison, let's tell the people, you will spend your time in prison. Doesn't matter about the time when it comes to choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
St. Pete, you're on the air, WPLP.
Hello,
Bob.
Yeah. Listen, on Jesus Christ, if he never lived, the first thing is obvious. There would be no Christianity. There would be no Inquisition, no Crusaders, no Mohammedanism, and we would have polygamy.
Of course, that wasn't the question.
You said what would happen if he was never crucified.
That's right.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, there's a big difference between never lived and never crucified.
Well, all right. But if he was never crucified, he would have just gone on and he would have been lost in time like everyone else. And we would, of course, the most obvious is we would not have had Jerry Falwell and Baker and all of these others that are around.
No, the point of it was Christ had to be crucified. That was
the
point.
Right. I agree with you there. Right.
Therefore, somebody had to kill him.
Right.
Therefore, they had no choice in it because it was all preordained.
Right. I agree.
Therefore, some men don't have free will, and if some don't have free will, what makes you think that other men do?
Well, actually, we do not have free will. According to religion, according to Christianity, if you look at it the way that you are looking at it, we do not have free will because we have no control over what we are doing. Everything is preordained, and we are going to do exactly what is planned because it said so in there that there are certain things that have to be done before certain things will happen. You get my logic on that?
Sure.
Okay. Now, all right, I'll get off of that. The Iran thing, the reason why they're holding the Iran hearing is so Congress can reaffirm its right over duties. That is the main thing, to find out who is in charge. Okay on that?
Uh-huh.
You have nothing to... Okay. I don't... I'm just... I waited so long, I lost part of my thought. And about morals, there are no absolutes, as you say. And as far as murder goes, I was once reading about some tribes there, that if they feel that they have a headache, if they have, they got in a fight with someone else, with another tribe, and they went over and they killed someone from that other tribe, then their headache would go away. And it went back and forth. So to them, murder was sort of absolute to them.
Thank you.
Remedy.
Thank you. St. Petersburg, you're on the air at WPLP.
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
Hey, can we talk about local TV news?
Sure.
All right. I live across the street from these people who were in this fire today. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And a man and his wife and their child were burned, or the child was burned to death. So it's been covered by the news all day. It's close to 8 o'clock tonight, and I'm watching the Pulse Plus truck go up and down the street. And it's obvious to anybody that's covered the story that the only people that live in the house across the street are the people who are either dead or in a burn unit at Tampa General. So what I ask, there's not a lot of argument to this. What I ask is, what is the story? The only possible thing these people could be doing is looking for a bereaved relative. And then again, it's the old story. What's the story, Do we want to see this? Is that what people want to see on TV?
Okay, you got a three-pronged problem here, at least right off the top of my head. The first problem is, unfortunately, it is what people want to see. Second problem is, doing news is incredibly expensive. Unbelievably expensive, and good journalists are damn few and far between. So very, very few television stations, quote-unquote local television stations, have the money for the staff or the quality of staff to literally go out and find news, i.e. what the mayor's up to, what various different business people are up to and doing wrong. And then the third part of the problem is, even if they did have the money and staff, they would be stepping on so many toes, they wouldn't do it for fear of putting themselves out of business. So local news, in terms of television, and unfortunately in most cases radio too, is an absolute sham. It is nothing more than local gossip.
There was 1 week a while back when Fowler was having I guess it was a, patronized Channel 10 week, where he had everybody on from Channel 10 one day after the next. And the day he called he had John Wilson on, I called and I recalled an event a while back during when the Marines were killed. Make this real quick. When the Marines were killed in Beirut, Cheryl Brown and an entourage accompanied a Marine Corps announcement to the front door of a family, and were there as the family got the announcement of the Marine's death. I mean, I thought that was so repulsive and disgusting. I couldn't contain myself.
I'm glad I didn't see it. I quite agree.
And I asked him, and he said, "This is what we want to see, and this is the services that they're providing." And I fail to see that this here tonight down on the south side is a service to anyone at all. And my neighbor next door tells me that it wasn't just their truck, but all of the trucks have been here fighting over this today. And Carl Vick from the Times called me this evening, and I'm sure he's a nice guy and all, but he only had one question. He wanted to know which of the two family cars this guy drove. I mean, he didn't.
Carl Vick?
Yeah.
He's the television editor.
I know he is. I used to work at the Times. But apparently he's doing some research on the story tonight. And that's all he asked me, is which car that Wayne regularly drove. And
well, of course, I might point out that Carl Vick, a little over a year ago, I did a bit of shtick. We had a staff meeting, and so I was an hour late coming to work, and I come up with this utterly incredible story about getting arrested at the Ooh La La Lounge for getting into a scuffle with a new dancer and David Fowler. And just that I would say no more about it, but nonetheless, thank you. I guess it was Tim Coles who sat in for me that day and just went on with the show, and lo and behold, if Carl Vick didn't call to verify the story.
Yeah. Well, that's I guess that's what this was, a verification. But he didn't, although I told him that they were real sweet people and a nice young couple and they were very friendly, although I told him that, that wasn't solicited. No one asked me if these people were, you know, your basic newsy questions. It was just like, which car does he drive, and I felt like I was burdening him with telling him my, personal reaction to it. And, he said, and I asked him about the news trucks. I said,
well, you should have said, I can't stand the people that are really scumbags, and I'm really glad this happened to them.
No, that's what they would like to catch on to. Jesus, that would make for some hot property.
You better believe that's what he was kind of secretly hoping you'd say.
I don't want to say that I don't want to put that in his mouth, because when I told him about the trucks going
well, he may not even realize it. I said that's what he was secretly hoping you would say.
Oh.
You'd ask him, he'd deny it.
Well, anyways, as the trucks were going by, I asked him the value of that, and he goes, I have to admit that if I were there right now and there were some relatives out on the lawn, I would have to ask them questions.
Yeah, how do you feel about this?
I said, maybe newspaper provides a buffer that a camera in the face doesn't. I don't know which is, if one's.
Well, the newspaper people rarely ask stupid questions like, how do you feel about this?
Well, they won't really.
Are you sorry that Joe's dead?
I think it's real sad. I think it's real sad. And I've heard this. It's an age-old, tired, old discussion about the value of one tragic story and sticking cameras in people's face. That's an old thing. But, this is the first time that it's real close to me, and I just find it repulsive that they're going by it, and they'll be here tomorrow, too.
My friend, on that point, I must run. I'm fresh out of time. But I thank you much. For the rest of you, I thank you, too. What else can I possibly say? Behave yourselves.